Hello, this is Robert Polenick, the owner of Brutal Iron Gym. I'm here for another video today. The topic for today is the importance of a consistent setup. And what this is really referring to is kind of like the main lifts, like squat, bench, and deadlift. But this would be true of a lot of other big movements, kind of like, you can relate it to pretty much any exercise, but there's not going to be much of a kind of a mental importance to setting up for, like, say, like a dumbbell lateral raise if it's warming up, you know, something like that. So this is kind of like in more regards to bigger lifts. So squat, bench, deadlift, maybe like a heavy barbell bent over row, you know, just something where you want to have a really good performance with a pretty heavy weight. So it's kind of like a big lift component. So on the board here we have a couple points that we're going to kind of talk about and kind of explain why it is important to have a consistent setup for these big type of lifts. So in this video we're going to be discussing, I'll kind of keep referring back to squat, bench, and deadlift, but like I said, it has to do with a lot of other larger exercises as well. So the first point we have, the terms we have here is thought capacity and autopilot. So what this is referring to is, so if we're thinking of a very heavy squat, we want to kind of, a lot of people, there's a lot of things to think of when you're squatting. So you're going to want to perform the lift well. You're also going to kind of get yourself psyched up. So there's cues to remember. There's also just kind of aggression and intensity, all these things going on at once. So thought capacity kind of refers to, at any given time, we only have 100% of ourselves to give to a task. So if I'm trying to do my squat and I'm kind of thinking about like the proper foot width, try to think of keeping my back tight. I'm going to try to say, okay, do I want to bend at my knees first or my hips first? What angle do I need to keep my body at? There's a lot of kind of things going on in our head. So, and that thought capacity is a term we're going to talk about here, to where like at any one given time we only have 100% of ourselves to give. So what the purpose of a consistent setup is if we do the same things every time, it becomes habitual, so you kind of becomes something you're kind of doing without thinking. So, and that's what the term autopilot refers to. And what that kind of means is, like, we all have that kind of experience where if you're driving from work to home at the end of a long day, maybe you got in a fight with a coworker or something, but your brain's very busy, you're kind of stressed or busy, you're not paying attention to the driving. So, and all of a sudden you leave work, all of a sudden you get home, and you don't know how you got there. You don't really remember doing all the steps of driving, you just somehow got there. So what we do is, if we know we only have 100% of our capacity, 100% to give, if we're trying to think of, say, 12 different cues to squat right, there's not much we're going to be able to give to each of those cues. So if you think of 10 cues with 100%, you only have 10% to give to each cue. So if we can get more of those cues to be automatic, where you don't have to really think of them, that leaves more of yourself, your thought capacity, to work on new cues or to work on other concepts. So the part of doing a consistent setup is that you're going to make more of the setup kind of mindless. And it doesn't mean mindless in a sense where it's not important. It just means mindless in a sense where you won't have to devote a lot of your thought capacity to that task. So for example, whenever I get up under a bar for a squat, so I kind of have a couple rules to myself. I'm not going to go through them all, but there are a lot of steps actually. So like, first of all, I don't touch the bar until I feel like I'm mentally committed to the lift. So once I do put my hands on the bar, I tend to grab very wide on the bar. So I'll have my hands on. I then will think of like tightening my back. So I'll think of pulling in my shoulder blades as I drop my head under. I tend to step under the bar with my right foot first. I'll then bring my left foot under the bar. I then think of pressurizing or pressing up into the bar, so to get everything kind of tight, get my body tight. And then like the next thing will be kind of driving my elbows, pulling my elbows down in towards my hips to again further create some back tightness. So I have all these things I do that I don't want to have to think of every single one of these things. I want them to become more automatic. And that kind of leads into our second step here, is developing explosiveness or aggression. So what I'll often see with clients is we might be working on 2 or 3 cues, and they're so busy thinking of the cues that they're moving the weight really slowly. And that's going to limit their strength because they're going so slow, because they have to check everything, that there's not enough kind of thought capacity to actually moving the weight. So they're thinking about this being tight, that being tight, and they kind of forget they actually have to lift the weight. So I know that sounds funny, but it actually does commonly happen. So they get so busy doing the other tasks, they forget the big picture thing. So however, they can't be explosive, they can't be aggressive until those small things become habits. And what I mean by this is if we have a person trying to remember to do 2 or 3 cues, and all of a sudden you tell them, hey, you got to move faster, and they do end up moving faster, but they forget one of those cues. So they kind of trade speed for form. And that's never something we want to do, because that's a good way to get hurt. So that kind of goes down to our third point there, is if you don't have these small cues set and you try to move past them, you can get hurt. Or if you try to get speed and aggression and forget one of the cues, you get hurt as well. So a concept we have here, double checking, eliminates double checking. What this refers to is developing speed. So if as you're squatting on the way down, so let's say you're already under the bar, everything's already tight, you've already unracked the weight, you're ready to go. So what will happen is if you think of, okay, my head has to be in this position, I want to keep my torso at this angle, I want to bend from my knees at this percentage, my hips at that percentage, I want to make sure my weight's on my heels, all these things are going on. What's going to happen is it creates slowness if it's not automatic, because your body's going to have to say, okay, I know you want this done, this certain cue, let me check and see if the cue is correct. Okay, that cue is correct, now let's go ahead and move. So the whole time you're trying to move, if these things are not consistent, your body's doing what I call is double checking. So it knows you want this done, it has to go check and see if it's done, and then if it is, then it tells you, okay, you can move. So if your body's always double checking things, that means you're going to be slower. So we want it to become habitual and kind of like a part of your constant routine, so that way your body just knows it's done and doesn't have to double check. So like we said, it's that analogy of kind of driving home without knowing how you got there. Your body wasn't double checking whether there was traffic, it wasn't double checking your speed, it was just kind of doing it once out of habit, and that was it. So it only had to do it, not like check it and then do it. So again, by developing a consistent setup, that'll develop your speed. And how that happens is because once your body doesn't have to double check everything, it can devote more of its thought capacity, more of that 100% of what it has to give, it can put that towards the speed and the aggression. So I'm preparing somebody for a powerlifting meet right now, and when we last met and kind of did their lifts together, they were very technically sound, they did the lifts very well, but they were very slow. And the person asked me, like, what do I need to do to get faster? And it wasn't necessarily thinking explosiveness and speed, because like I said, very often they'll lose one of those cues, and this person is relatively new to powerlifting, so that's the stage they're in now, is they have developed the technique to be really well, but it's not automatic yet, to where if they now think of trying to be fast, they will lose one or 2 of those cues. So very often if somebody lifts technically sound and slow, they just need to keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and then that speed will slowly start to come. So they do have to have a point where they're going to say, okay, I'm going to try to move fast, and maybe they'll forget one cue, but they can come back the next set, get that cue, and keep the speed. So over time they will develop the speed if they keep chasing after it, but that foundation of the cues being correct, the form being correct, has to be there first. So and again, that's because if the form is correct, the body doesn't have to double check everything, it'll kind of set itself for the autopilot, and then it has more room from its thought capacity to put towards that speed. So the other thing we have there was prevent injuries. We already talked about that a little bit, but is if you think of breathing and bracing your core, you try to think of what body parts need to be in what positions. If all of that becomes automatic and you do it every single rep, every single time you get under the bar, then that'll ensure that you're going to be in the best position, the safest position, and that'll prevent injuries for you. So the next thing we have here is trial and error. So when you're trying to figure out what setup is correct for you, one of the ways I recommend is to watch someone else's setup. So I go on YouTube and I might find a lifter I really like, Maybe they have a form similar to mine, or an attitude or a style of lifting that I like that's similar to what I feel would be best for me. So I'll kind of watch their setup, see how they do things before I lift, and then I'll try to mimic that. So we have it like right here where it says copy. I'll try to copy that. I'll try to do what they're doing. And then I might find, okay, well, they do this, but I need it done slightly this way. So maybe they step under the bar. Maybe they're left-handed, I'm right-handed, so a couple of the cues will be backwards, something like that. But the idea is you want to start with a template or start with somebody. So you're going to copy somebody, and then you'll try to, right here, it says make it your own. So once you try someone else's, so especially a deadlift, for example, like let's say so-and-so you find online, before they deadlift, they have their arms up in the air, and then they kind of pinch their lats, they drop down, they'll get tight under the bar, and then they lift. And then you might find, okay, that's too long for me. I feel like I lose kind of speed, or you feel like there's too much time, and all of a sudden you get thrown off because there's too much time to think of things. So you'll overthink it if there's too much time. So you might find, okay, I like that setup, but let me do it a little bit faster. So, and not faster in a sense where you lose your cues, but faster in a sense where it'll allow you not to overthink it. So that's the first thing I would do, is copy someone else's and see what you like about it, what you don't like about it, but that at least gives you a starting point. And then as you're going through the lifts, you can then kind of make it your own and develop it. So the last point we have there is it's a continuous process. So as you get better at lifting, more and more cues will become, you'll just realize there's more cues to lifting heavy weights. So like whatever form it took me to squat 405 is a lot different than the form I use now to squat over 600. So there's more cues I have to kind of learn along the time, like the way, that got me stronger. And then as my body got stronger, I had to do different things different ways. So it's always a continuous process. So maybe you, right now, you know 5 things you need to do for your squat to look really good. So all of a sudden you're doing those 5 things really well, you're squatting really good, but now all of a sudden there's a new problem in your squat. So maybe on the way up, your upper back kind of rounds. And you realize, oh crap, I'm doing my 5 things, but I need to add this 6th thing, maybe of like pinching my elbows down towards my hips. So there might be some additional cue. So some people will kind of push out into the bar, some people pinch down. There's a couple different ways of setting all that up, but you might learn that there's an additional cue you've got to add, and you have to be willing to and accepting of adding that into your routine. So it's kind of a continuous process. So once you get your set, don't think that that's it and you're never going to change it. You have to be willing to add more cues in as you get stronger. So that's kind of the idea of consistent setup. So there's a quote you'll hear kind of in the powerlifting world where the quote is, treat 135 like your max and your max like 135. And what that refers to is you want to treat lightweight like it's heavy and heavyweight like it's light. And what they mean by that is treat lightweight by its heavy, treat lightweight like it's heavy. There you go. So what they mean is you want to set up under light weights the exact same order, consistency, pattern, everything that you would get under big weights. And that's exactly what the whole point of this video is for, is what that does is all of these benefits. So if you treat lightweight like it's heavy, meaning that you set up underneath it the proper way every single time, that gets all of these benefits. And then the second half of that phrase, to treat heavyweight like it's light, what they mean by that is to don't be fearful of the weight. You still want to move with the same speed. So if you have a certain descent speed on your bench or your squat, all of a sudden when the bar gets heavy, don't go super duper slow and wear yourself out. Likewise, don't drop down super duper fast. So you're just going to kind of keep it the exact same way as you did when you were doing your warm-ups. So when you were doing your lighter weights, you're just going to do it the exact same way when you get your heavy weights. So that's what that phrase kind of means. So again, this is a quick little video about the importance of a consistent setup. So don't get into the gym, don't just kind of blow through your first couple warm-up sets of a lift and then all of a sudden start to try to pay attention to heavy ones. That's kind of a rookie mistake, amateur mistake. You're going to miss all these benefits. So when you get into the gym, get yourself ready. If you're bench pressing and you start just under the bar, you want to set up exactly under just an empty bar as you would under your 1 rep max. So start building that consistency, start building your pattern from the very first set and do it every single set. So if you keep practicing that and you keep that in mind, you will get all these benefits. Okay? So hopefully that this video helped a little bit. So there you go. So if you have any more questions, or if you have any other video topics, you can email the gym at brutalirongym. That's all one word, all small letters, brutalirongym@gmail.com, and I'll make sure I respond to you. Okay, thank you.